Hey there, I'm Ari from the Tech Buyers Guru, and I've got major product news for here on the channel today. It's October 8th, 2020, and AMD has just announced its new 5000 series of Zen 3 CPUs hitting the market on November 5th. Now, there are 4 SKUs that are all going to hit the market at the same time, which is pretty impressive, and AMD is promising a 19% IPC, or instructions per clock cycle, uplift on each of those versus their predecessors. This is really impressive, but it will all come down to price performance, and some of these SKUs are a little bit more impressive in terms of price performance than others. So let me go through the chart, starting at the bottom with the new 5600X. It comes in at $300 for 6 cores and 12 threads. This is the successor to the $250 3600X. And you're going to see a pattern here that AMD is simply tacking on $50 for each of its CPUs, which makes some of these CPUs a little bit more compelling than others. I think the 5600X is going to let down a lot of enthusiasts in the budget market because they've thought about the Ryzen 5 3600 that I have here at $200 as a great price point and really a benchmark in terms of price performance. Well, if we add in the 19% IPC uplift plus slightly higher clocks, we're going to get between 20 and 25% better performance from the 5600X than the 3600X, and slightly more than that versus the 3600. But it's going to be nowhere near 50%, and that's going to be the price difference between those two CPUs. So budget users are going to want to stick with the 3600. That's still going to be the price performance leader. Now moving up to the Ryzen 7 series of 8-core, 16-thread CPUs, I have the 3700X here, and this has been a huge seller for AMD. Unfortunately, I don't think the 5800X is going to follow in its footsteps. Priced at $450, or $50 more than the poorly priced 3800X. The 5800X is a non-starter. I'm going to give that a do not buy recommendation. $450, that's nearly the same price as Intel's 10-core, 20-thread CPU. That's the 10,850K at $480. And frankly, I don't know why you'd go with AMD for fewer cores and really more money per core than Intel. That's really a strange position for AMD to be in. I think they made a mistake on the 5800X. But let's move up the product stack to the 5900X. This is the product that AMD actually spent the most time talking about during its press conference. And priced at $550, it's again $50 more than the 3900X that I have here. And at that price point, I think it's actually quite good. You're actually paying just $46 per core versus well over $50 per core for the 5800X, and still $50 per core for the 5600X. So the best value on a per core basis in this entire lineup is the 5900X at $550. That's 12 cores, 24 threads. Again, just $50 more than the original price of the 3900X, so 10% uplift, but probably 25% uplift in terms of performance. That's actually a pretty good value, except if you consider that you can buy the 3900X for $430 right now. So I anticipate that that CPU will stick around for a while as more of a value buy for people who want that 12-core, 24-thread performance, but don't need the full performance of the 5900X. Now, there is one more SKU in the stack, and that is the top-end 5950X coming in at $800, or $50 more than the 3950X. Again, consider that it's going to have a 19% uplift in terms of IPC plus slightly higher clock, so we're talking up to 25% faster than the 3950X for just $50 more, or if you look at current selling prices, $100 more, because that 3950X is currently selling for around $700. I think that's an obvious win for content creators, but I personally am most excited about that 5900X at $550 because it is the cheapest on a per core basis, and it gets you fantastic content creation performance and fantastic gaming performance. Now, one thing that I do want to warn you all about is a potential fly in the ointment on launch day, November 5th, and that is we do not have a new chipset to go alongside these new CPUs. So we're going to be relying on B450, B550, and X570 motherboards. And those have been out at retail for quite some time, particularly B450, which was launched in the middle of 2018. Now, motherboard manufacturers will likely offer firmware updates at launch, but you may not get those in retail boards at launch, which means if you buy a motherboard off a store shelf, whether online or in person, you may get a motherboard that doesn't have firmware support for your new CPU. That's going to be a no-boot situation. This is unfortunately not going to be the first time this happens for AMD, and unless they've pulled off some miracle, there's no way they've replaced all of the firmware in those board partner boards out in the market today. I actually checked the Asus and Gigabyte site just after launch to see if there was any mention of brand new firmware for those boards, X570, B450, and B550. There's nothing up there yet, and that means I don't think the board partners have the new firmware. And if they do, and they're keeping it a secret, it's still unlikely that all of the motherboards in the retail channel will be cleared out by November 5th. So if you pick something up off the shelf, there's a good chance it won't have the proper firmware. Now, for folks who are upgrading from existing Zen CPUs, that's no problem. But for purchases of brand new AMD-based systems, this is going to be another nightmare. It's happened before. It may happen again, but it probably won't happen with Zen 4 because I believe this is the end of the line for the AM4 socket. I believe that when we do get Zen 4, we'll have a brand new chipset and a brand new socket, and AMD is going to kind of say, hey, end of the line for future support. This is as high as we go with AM4. So this 5000 series or Zen 3 is the end of the line. But hey, if you bought a B450 motherboard in 2018, you got some good value out of that motherboard. If you bought, say, an X370 in 2017, you're probably not quite as happy because a lot of those boards won't be updated with firmware support for Zen 3. Now, looking forward a little bit, we do know that Intel is going to launch Rocket Lake in March of 2021. That's going to be about 4 months after Zen 3 hits, and this will be the first time in 5 years that Intel has any IPC uplift at all, since Skylake in 2015. This could be a situation where Intel is just able to leapfrog Zen 3 a few months later, and we'll have this tit-for-tat competition, which is actually great for consumers. To have Intel and AMD really so closely matched, it's really a win-win. And take note, this is the first time since 2006 that AMD has claimed the IPC advantage. All right, so we're talking almost 15 years since AMD could claim the performance throne across the board in terms of games, content creation, and everything else. This is actually quite exciting for AMD fans, but it may not last long. We are going to find out in March 2021 when Intel launches Rocket Lake. Now, one last little tidbit that was released at the press conference today, and that is that Lisa Su did reveal a little bit about the Radeon RX 6000 series that's launching on October 28th. Now, of course, this is still shrouded in mystery, but we do know that there is an RX 6000 coming, and they did give a few benchmarks, including in Borderlands 3, which is a great platform-agnostic game that both NVIDIA and AMD use for benchmarking. At 4K, maximum quality, you get 61 frames per second. That compares to 70 frames per second for the RTX 3080 and around 50 frames per second for the RTX 2080 Ti. That puts the RX 6000 GPU right in the middle of those two GPUs. It also means that it's going to be ahead of RTX 3070, which NVIDIA has said is right on par with the RTX 2080 Ti. Now, rumor had it that the RX 6000 GPU, whatever it's eventually called, would come out at $600. And I think that would be fair if it was right in between those prior SKUs from NVIDIA. But I think AMD could pull a fast one and price it at $550 or maybe even $500. If AMD gets extremely aggressive, as it has been in the past with its Zen CPUs, and really pushes on NVIDIA in the GPU market, we could see a $500 launch price for the RX 6000, which would absolutely require NVIDIA to lower the price of its RTX 3070. It's already announced that at $500 in anticipation of an October 15th launch, which it delayed to October 29th, the day after AMD launches the RX 6000. I really can't think of a time that's been more exciting in the CPU and GPU markets. We have so much competition between these three companies, and of course AMD being in both markets gives it a really interesting position of competing against two larger companies and doing it pretty well. So congrats to AMD, and kudos to all you fans of AMD. I know a lot of you guys who watch this channel are big AMD fans, and hey, I'm right there with you. I do believe AMD has done great things, particularly in the CPU market and potentially now in the GPU market. We will soon find out. If you have any questions about what I've said in this video, please post them down below. I'll be sure to get back to you. If you enjoy this content, please do give me a like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time.